Now, we come into chapter 2, which is the introduction of Moses into the story. Everything before that is filled those 400 plus years between Joseph and Moses' birth. That was chapter 1. Now we get into chapter 2. Now, as we dive into chapter 2, let's pause for a moment and look at some of the things that make Moses such an amazing prophet in the history of the gospel dispensations. You've probably seen this happen in other settings where people will take a person and they'll put that person on a comparative table with the Lord Jesus Christ and show how there are similarities between the two people. And at first, that's a fun exercise just because it's neat to see those connections. But at a deeper level, I think it's very helpful to see these kinds of connections, to see that what the scriptures tell us is true when it says all things denote that there is a Christ. All things point to him. All good things, I should probably clarify here, to the point where hopefully you and I can begin to live our lives a little more intentionally, a little more purposefully, a little more actively thinking through, rather than just living, just going to bed and waking up and eating and going about our business and letting life happen, but to intentionally strive to put our name over here so that people can see comparisons between Christ's life and ours, because we're seeking to become more like him. So just for fun, this is not an exhaustive list. Many people have done this before. I'm going to share a couple of the items off of a list that Jack Welch, he being one of the founders here at Book of Mormon Central, one that he prepared years ago in BYU Studies. Listen to this for a minute. Both Jesus and Moses escaped being killed as a baby when the decree of a king, Pharaoh in Moses' case, Herod in Jesus' case, condemned all male infants to death in that region. Neither one was an Egyptian, but both lived among the Egyptians who ended up preserving their lives when they were little babies. Same thing. He was born in Bethlehem, but then very quickly taken down to Egypt to preserve his life. Both were raised with the legal right to become a king. But instead of being a king, they belonged to a nation, in this case Israel, oppressed by a pagan and foreign government. Egypt for Moses, Rome for Jesus, who was born and adopted by Joseph as the son of David, as this line. Another one, freed his people from slavery through a lamb that was slain for the Passover. Jesus is the lamb that is slain to free all of us from slavery. They both come out of Egypt in order to fulfill their missions. Moses passes through the Red Sea. Jesus passed through the waters of baptism. Another way, so that's the one that Jack Welch uses. Another one to add to that is the fact that Jesus walked on top of the water of the Sea of Galilee without being destroyed by that force. Both spent 40-somethings, 40 years in the wilderness, 40 days up on Mount Sinai, 40 years in Egypt, 40 years out in Midian, and then the 40 years in the wilderness. The number 40 keeps coming up with Christ. At the beginning of his ministry, after being baptized, he spends 40 days up in the wilderness to be with God. And both fasted for 40 days during that time when they were up on Mount Sinai and in the wilderness with God. While in the wilderness, was administered to by angels. While in the wilderness, administered to by angels, and was tempted of the devil. Moses was also tempted of the devil. And we covered that back in Moses 1. Moses gave the law to the people from the mountain. Christ gives the upgrade or the higher connections, covenantal connections from the mountain. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. And that is just the beginning of the list. If you wanted and if you were interested, you could spend lots of time in your study finding additional connections between Moses and Christ. And hopefully it would lead you to once again put your name over here.